work as a receptionist at a dental clinic in the east end of Houston, Texas. Every morning, I take the same route on the city's electric bus to get to work. I always pick one of the front seats, plug in my headphones, and lose myself in horror podcasts, the kind that sends shivers down your spine. It became a comforting routine, strangely enough. It calmed me down, ironic as that sounds. I used to believe that after listening to so many scary stories, nothing could really catch me off guard. That those tales were just that, stories, exaggerations, inventions. But what happened to me that morning still makes me question everything I thought I knew about reality. And the most disturbing part? I wasn't the only one who experienced it. It was early Tuesday morning. The sun hadn't even started rising. I boarded the electric bus like I always did, and luckily found a window seat. I was completely absorbed in the podcast episode of the day, this one titled, "Never Cross Franklin Square After Dark," when someone slipped into the seat next to mine. It was a child, no older than 6. He was dressed in a black hoodie, dark cotton pants, and worn-out sneakers, all the same shade of faded black. I was a bit thrown off that he sat next to me, especially since the rest of the bus was nearly empty. There were plenty of open seats, but he chose mine, right beside me. He wasn't carrying a backpack or lunchbox, nothing that suggested he was headed to school. I didn't see any adult nearby who might have been his parent or guardian either. What struck me the most was how he behaved. He didn't say a word. He never looked at me directly, but every time I reached into my purse, he tilted his head slightly, as if trying to see what I was pulling out. It was odd, really odd. I have nephews around that age, and I know how kids are. Fidgety, full of questions, constantly moving. But this boy sat motionless, his head down, like he was waiting for a signal, a word, a reaction, anything. I started to feel uneasy. There was something about his presence that didn't feel natural. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was more like a quiet sorrow, like he carried some kind of silent grief he couldn't explain. When my stop finally came, I leaned slightly toward him to speak. "Excuse me, please." He didn't say anything, just swung his legs to the side so I could pass. "Thanks," I whispered, stepping out carefully, not wanting to brush against him. But as I stood, I noticed a woman seated behind us looking at me with total bewilderment. Another one, farther back, leaned forward as if to ask something, but she didn't. She just stared, confused, as if she had no idea who I'd been talking to. That's when something inside me tightened. What if that child hadn't really been there? I turned to look one last time before getting off. The seat was empty, completely. No one was there. If you're into stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and let me know in the comments what's the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to you, because this is just the beginning. As I stepped off the bus, my legs felt unstable. It was like I had forgotten how to walk properly. I wasn't scared, at least not yet. It was something else, a strange hollow feeling, like something had snapped inside me without warning. I walked to the clinic without looking back. I didn't want to know if someone was following me. That whole day I couldn't focus. I messed up scheduling appointments, left paperwork sitting out, and even answered the phone like I was on autopilot. One of my co-workers asked if I was feeling sick. I just told her I hadn't slept well, but it wasn't about sleep. There was something pressing against my chest, like an invisible shadow lingering right behind me, always watching. That night when I got home, I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I checked under the bed. I felt ridiculous. Who does that at 29? But something inside me needed to be sure, needed to confirm that I was alone. And yet, I didn't feel alone. The weirdest part? It wasn't the first time I had felt something like this. A few weeks earlier, on the same route, an older woman stared at me throughout the entire ride. I thought maybe she recognized me, but I couldn't place her. As we reached the final stop, just before getting off, she leaned close and whispered something. So low, I barely heard it. I only caught one word: careful. Back then, I brushed it off. But now, everything seemed connected. That night, before falling asleep, I thought about the boy again. I tried convincing myself that he had gotten off the bus before me, that I just hadn't noticed. But then, why had the other women looked at me like that? Why that expression of pure confusion on their faces? I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him sitting beside me, head tilted, watching my purse, waiting, not doing anything, just existing, like a heavy presence that refused to leave. I got up and played some soft music, hoping it would help. It didn't. That image of him kept resurfacing. That's when I started to believe it hadn't been in my head, that there was more to it, that I wasn't alone. I started digging through forums, reading similar experiences, and I came across a sentence that stuck with me. When the dead are unseen, they cling to those who can see them. And even though I didn't want to believe it, a part of me started to wonder, why me? A few weeks went by and I decided to take a short trip to visit my mum's family in New Mexico. It was a quick visit and my brother Aaron came with me. Our parents couldn't make it since they didn't have the paperwork to leave the state, so we went on their behalf. The plan was to spend a few quiet days in the countryside, away from the noise, in a little place called San Gregorio. On the second day, my uncle Miguel suggested taking us to a nearby reservoir. He said it was perfect for cooling off. It was about a 30-minute drive tucked between hills and dry trees. The place looked like an old postcard. The water was dark, silent. It didn't reflect the sky. It held a thick greenish tint. As soon as we parked, Uncle Miguel jumped out, pulling off his shirt and shoes as he ran. He dove in without hesitation. Aaron and I laughed and followed him, thinking our cousins would join in too. But when we came out of the water, shivering, we realized they hadn't even approached the shore. They were with their mum, setting up a folding table and some plastic chairs. They didn't seem interested in swimming at all. I felt a bit bad. We should have helped them. But what was strange came later. Even once the table was set and food was out, our cousins still stayed away from the water. They just stared at it from a distance, like something unseen was holding them back. My Aunt Linda spoke softly, almost like a warning. She said that reservoir wasn't like the others, that there were thick branches under the surface, ones that felt like they were trying to grab you. She told us not to open our eyes underwater and to stay in the shallow end. Aaron laughed, said we were good swimmers. She didn't argue, just looked over at her youngest, Lucas, who then added something that made us fall silent. He said that once, when he snuck in without permission, he felt hands pulling him downward. He couldn't scream, just kicked and thrashed until he broke free. Swore it really happened. Said nobody believed him, but he remembered it like it was yesterday. The creepiest part? Linda didn't correct him. Didn't say it was nonsense or imagination. She just looked at us and said, "Be careful." The rest of the day we moved between laughter and unease. My uncle didn't seem worried. He swam out far, dove from rocks, made jokes. But we stayed close to shore. The feeling had settled in. Something about that place didn't sit right. Something felt off, and the worst part, that was just the beginning. It was near sunset, when the light began to dip behind the mountains and the reservoir was swallowed by slow, creeping shadows. Uncle Miguel was swimming further out, taking one last lap before getting out. Aaron had already sat down on a rock, arms folded, face pale. He said he was tired, but I could tell by his voice. Something had rattled him, something he couldn't explain. I, on the other hand, decided to stay in the water a little longer. Despite everything, I felt calm, until curiosity got the better of me. I remembered what my aunt had warned us. Don't open your eyes underwater. Don't look. But that's exactly why I did it. To prove to myself that there was nothing there. I submerged for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and opened my eyes. The water wasn't clear. There were branches, mud, and long strands of something like hair floating around. But amid all that, I saw something. A shape, small. It was moving, clumsily, like a child learning to swim. Its skin was pale, almost white, a stark contrast against the murky green around it. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't an animal. It was a tiny body, with little arms flailing awkwardly, as if trying to stay afloat, but moving in jerky, unnatural motions. My heart started racing. I squeezed my eyes shut and shot up to the surface. I was out of breath, and a chill ran up my spine from toes to neck. I got out of the water without a word and walked straight over to where my brother was still sitting on the rock. I sat beside him, silent. He spoke first. "You saw it too?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. He glanced at me and sighed. "I saw something else," he murmured, barely audible. "When you stayed in the water alone, I noticed something rise up in the deeper part. At first, I thought it was a branch, but it wasn't. It was a head, only from the nose up, like someone was watching us." I swallowed hard. My stomach clenched tight. A head. Yeah, and it had something on it, like a soaked rag over the forehead, like it was holding onto it. No expression. It didn't move, just floated. And when I got a little closer, it sank, slowly, like it wasn't in a hurry. We sat there without another word. The reservoir looked undisturbed, like nothing had happened. Our cousins, still at the table, glanced over but didn't come near. My uncle climbed out of the water and began packing up, as relaxed as ever, but we were no longer the same. That night, back at the house, we realized we hadn't imagined anything. What we saw wasn't the result of cold or fatigue. It was real, and it seemed our cousins already knew. After showering, we had dinner in silence. No one mentioned what had happened. My uncle turned on the TV in the dining room. My aunt quietly cleared the dishes with an eerie calm, like she knew something had shaken us, but chose not to speak of it. Aaron barely touched his food. I ate without tasting anything, my mind replaying those images I couldn't shake off. Later that night, in the room we were sharing with our older cousin Elijah, he shut the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at us with a half smile. "Now you get why we don't go in the water?" he asked, as if he'd been waiting for us to experience it firsthand. Aaron and I nodded. There was no need to explain. Elijah pulled out his phone, scrolled through some saved photos, and showed us a post he said was over 8 months old. It was a blurry picture of a group of teenagers, 6 of them, posing in front of the reservoir. They wore school uniforms, some with backpacks, a few laughing. They used to be classmates of mine, he said, pointing to 2 boys in particular. These 2 told us that right before this picture was taken, they saw something in the trees, said it looked like a man, with rabbit ears. I waited for him to laugh, to say it was a joke, but his face was grave, tense. "They went into the water," he continued, "said it was just to swim for a bit. They never came back out. The others freaked out and called for help. For days, rescue teams searched. Divers, local police, volunteers. They found nothing. No bodies. It was like the reservoir swallowed them whole. A cold chill crawled down my spine. Aaron was completely still. Elijah looked down and put away his phone. Since then, no one in our family goes near the water. Except my dad. He thinks it's all superstition. Says people around here exaggerate, that it's just old tales. But we all know something's wrong with that place. Something lives there, something that takes whoever dares to look." I wanted to ask more, but something held me back. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was fear. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale face slowly sinking, that rag clinging to its head, that white shape drifting among the branches. But the worst part wasn't what we saw. It was what I felt. A presence, like the place knew we were watching it, like it had been waiting for us. We came back home from the trip carrying a strange weight. We didn't talk about it, neither between us nor with our parents. It felt like putting it into words would make it more real, more dangerous. But a week later, something triggered a memory I had buried deep inside. It happened during a family lunch at my grandmother's house in Kansas. My uncles and cousins were there, and among them my cousin Riley. She's a few years younger than me, always curious and playful. While we were having coffee and cinnamon rolls, someone briefly mentioned the incident at the reservoir without going into details. Riley fell quiet for a moment, then said, "That reminds me of what happened with Grandpa's camera." No one spoke. We just looked at her, and then she started telling the story. "It was about 5 years ago, back when we still lived here with Grandma. I was around 9. One day I found that old camera, remember? The broken one that was kept in the wooden wardrobe. I was bored, so I started playing with it, pretending to take pictures of the plants, the furniture. But when I pointed it at the door to the upstairs room, I saw something. The air in the living room changed. It felt colder, heavier. I saw a boy," she said, "standing in the doorway. No expression, just staring at me. But what scared me most was that he had one blue eye and one black eye. He was small, light-skinned, short hair. When I lowered the camera and looked directly, he was gone. There was dead silence. No one laughed, no one joked. And then my sister, Natalie, who had just been listening until then, looked up and said quietly, 'I saw him too.' We stared at her, stunned. She had never said anything before. 'When we were little,' she said, 'we used to share a room, remember? Every night that boy would stand at the foot of my bed, always silent. He'd ask me to come with him. One time, he even took my hand. He had the same eyes, one blue, one black.' I told Mom, but she thought I was imagining things. They sent me to therapy, and eventually I stopped talking about it." I froze. They had both seen the same thing, years apart, without ever having shared it before. No one could explain it. And the worst part, we didn't know what it meant. Was it the same boy? Why them? Why those eyes? That day I went home certain that what we experienced at the reservoir wasn't an isolated incident. There was a pattern, a presence, and maybe it had been following our family for years, without anyone noticing. My dad passed away nearly a year ago after a lung condition sent him to the hospital. It was a devastating loss, but we told ourselves he went peacefully, without pain. At least, that's what we wanted to believe. In the weeks after his funeral, I started dreaming about him frequently. He always appeared smiling, walking beside me like nothing had changed. I'd wake up crying, but with a strange sense of comfort. Like he was still watching over us, but over time the dreams began to shift. He no longer looked peaceful. He started appearing tired, his eyes unfocused. In one dream, he told me he couldn't see clearly, that everything was blurry, that he needed my help. I woke up uneasy. When I told my mum, she looked at me for a long time and said something I never expected from someone so grounded in logic. "Maybe he needs his glasses." We had packed away his belongings in a box that hadn't been opened since the funeral. I went to it, found his old glasses, wrapped them in a handkerchief, and took them to the cemetery. I didn't know what I was doing, really. I just improvised. I dug a small hole beside his gravestone and placed them there. I whispered as if he could hear me, "Here you go, Dad. Now you can see better." After that day, strange things started happening around me. An unexplained chill in the living room, lights flickering for no reason, the office printer turning on by itself. I told myself it was coincidence, until I met Marlene. She came in to apply for a credit card at the bank where I work. She was quiet, kind, the sort of person who makes you feel at ease without saying much. As I explained the process to her, she looked at me closely, like my words didn't matter. Then, at the end, she hugged me. It was unusual. We didn't know each other. She said, "Take care of yourself." It struck me as odd, but I didn't dwell on it. 2 weeks later, Marlene returned, not as a customer, but as a new employee. From the start, she treated me with unexpected familiarity. One afternoon in the break room, she asked to speak privately. "I hope I'm not overstepping," she said, "but I need to tell you something." When I first came in and you helped me, I saw a man standing behind you, tall, with straight brown hair. I've seen him several times since. Even in my home, he doesn't speak. He just watches me. I was speechless. I showed her a picture of my dad. Marlene turned pale. "That's him," she whispered. "He spoke to me one night. Said he couldn't rest because he was leaving you alone. That he loves you, but doesn't know how to let go." That night, I understood something. Love can be so strong, it keeps a soul from finding peace. And I, without realizing it, was the one holding him back. The next day at work, Marlene approached me with a gentleness I truly appreciated. She handed me a folded piece of paper with handwritten instructions. It was a small ritual, nothing elaborate, just a white candle, a glass of water, a photo of my dad, and most importantly, I had to speak out loud. I had to tell him it was okay to go, that we loved him, but he didn't have to stay anymore. She asked one more thing, to talk to my family, to invite them to take part, for each of us to light a candle, to speak from the heart, to let him go. That night I found the courage to tell them everything. My mom looked at me with a mixture of warmth and disbelief. My siblings stayed quiet. My sister Allison was the first to speak. "Everyone's free to believe what they want, but I'm not doing that." My younger brother wasn't on board either. Only my mother said she would pray for him. I felt alone, frustrated, but also certain of what I needed to do. I waited until everyone had gone to bed. I lit a white candle in the living room, placed one of Dad's photos on the table with a glass of water beside it. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes and began to speak. "Dad, you can go now. Everything's going to be okay. You didn't leave anything undone. You gave us everything. We love you and we'll always remember you, but you don't have to stay. You can rest." And the moment I said those words, something changed. I felt a hand on my shoulder, solid, warm. I turned immediately, but no one was there. Still, I wasn't afraid. I felt peace, like I could finally breathe after holding it in for too long. That night, I slept better than I had in months, and I dreamed of him. We were walking through a local flea market in South Houston, like we used to when I was little. He bought me candy, held my hand, and before we parted, he smiled and said, "I love you, sweetheart, but now it's time for me to go." I woke up with tears in my eyes, but a calm heart. From that day on, things began to change. My energy returned. My back stopped aching. I no longer woke up feeling drained. And gradually, the dreams about him faded. But there was something else. For weeks, the house carried a soft, persistent scent of flowers. Not just any flowers. Red roses, my dad's favorite. We didn't have any in the house, but the fragrance would appear gently every time I thought of him. It wasn't a goodbye. It was his way of telling me that this time, he was truly at peace. A few months after everything that happened with my dad, we had an unexpected visitor. It was a Thursday afternoon when my Aunt Caroline showed up at our door. She had always been a bright light, full of laughter and energy. But that day, she wasn't herself. From the moment she stepped inside, I could feel something was off, like her light had been dimmed by an unseen shadow. She had bruises on her face, one on her left cheekbone, another on her forehead, awkwardly covered with makeup. When my mum saw her, she was alarmed. "What happened to you, Caroline?" "Oh, nothing," she said with a forced smile. "Someone bumped into me on the street. I fell and hit the sidewalk, but I'm okay now." We tried to carry on as if it were just another visit. I kept my distance, and I wasn't sure why. I'd always been close to her, but now something made me uneasy. It wasn't fear, it was discomfort. My mom convinced her to spend the night. It was late, and the next bus back to Denton, where she lived, wouldn't come for a while. As always, in our small house, beds were limited. I ended up sharing one with her and my older sister. That night was long. My aunt couldn't sleep. She kept shifting, sitting up, mumbling. And the strangest thing, She kept pinching my sister's feet, over and over, as if she was anxious or trying to confirm she was still there. The next day, we walked her to the station. When the bus arrived, the driver frowned as soon as he saw her. He motioned for us to hurry on board. Caroline hugged us tightly, said she'd be back for my brother's birthday party, and mentioned she was excited for my sweet 16, even though that was still years away. The driver kept checking the rearview mirror as they pulled away. Later that evening, when my mom returned from work, we told her everything. The odd behavior, the bruises, the bus driver. We all agreed something had felt off. Like that hadn't really been our aunt. Like her body was there, but not her spirit. 2 weeks passed. One afternoon, my dad came back from the farm with a pale face. He sat down, looked at us, and spoke quietly. "Your Aunt Caroline passed away." No one reacted at first. We didn't understand. "What do you mean she passed?" "It happened over a month ago," he added. "She was hit by a bus right after leaving the station. She had gone to say goodbye to her daughter before her trip to Florida. They say she died instantly." A knot tightened in my throat. I looked at my sister. She had seen her too, had slept beside her. We'd hugged her at the bus stop. So, who was it that came to visit? I couldn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but because of the overwhelming certainty that sometimes the dead find a way to say goodbye. After the news, the house fell into silence. It wasn't sadness or even confusion. It was something else, a shared emptiness. We had all lived through the same thing, yet now we were being asked to accept that it never could have happened. But it did. I saw her walk in. My mother brushed her hair. My sister slept with her. We cooked her dinner. We gave her a blessing before she got on the bus. So how could she have already been dead? The days that followed felt surreal. We didn't bring it up again, as if staying silent kept it safely locked away. But deep down, we knew. We couldn't keep pretending, because it wasn't the first time. All of it. The boy on the bus, the figure in the reservoir, the child with mismatched eyes, the pale face in the water, my father who couldn't move on. None of it was random. They were signs. That became even clearer when my grandparents came to visit. Without us saying a word, they confirmed everything, that Caroline had died the day of the accident, that her wake had been held at home, that her daughter had returned from Florida long before the supposed visit. Everything lined up except our memory. One evening during a long family dinner, my mom broke the silence. Her eyes were glassy, her voice low. "That wasn't your aunt, or at least not completely." We asked what she meant. "I brushed her hair," she said. "I saw the bruises. I felt her scalp in my hands, but there was something not of this world. Like her soul came back just to finish something." My sister then whispered almost inaudibly, "That night when I slept next to her, she kept pinching my feet. It wasn't a dream. I'd wake up and she'd be sitting up, eyes open, staring out the window, but she wouldn't speak." Since then, the atmosphere in our home changed, not with fear, but with reverence. We now understand that not everything can be explained, that some things can't be reasoned through, yet we feel them all the same. And sometimes, the dead return, because they need to say goodbye. Every time I smell roses in the living room, I think of my dad. Every time I walk past a bus stop, I see Caroline's pale face in my mind. And when I ride the city bus, I double-check before I sit down, just in case someone's waiting to be seen. Some say it's all suggestion, that the mind plays tricks. And maybe they're right, but I know what I lived, what we saw, what we felt. And even if I can't explain it, I wouldn't change any of it, because now I understand that death isn't always the end. Sometimes it's just the moment when one last door opens, so someone can finally say goodbye.